Asynchronous programming is about programming in such a way that we can initiate some action and set up a callback to handle it, knowing that the logic in the callback isn't going to run immediately after the call, but rather will run sometime in the future. One of the most common asynchronous operations in web development today is making a network call. In this case, we set up a callback to handle when the response comes back from the original request, understanding that we don't really have any control over when in the future that response is going to be coming back. All we can control is being ready to handle it when it does. We can look at asynchronous programming in this lens by making a network call using pure JavaScript and the XML HTTP request object, XHR for short. It allows us to make requests and receive responses. In our very simple example, we're looking at our index.html page. As you can see, in the body we just have two tags set up here, a button that says get foods with a class foods button, and we're linking to a script here, app.js, which is in the same folder. I'll point out right now that behind the scenes here, we do have a local web server running, and it is able to return to us a JSON list of foods in response to a request. As we discussed, in app.js, we're going to look at making an asynchronous network call to our web server using just pure JavaScript. Firstly, I'm going to get a reference to my button since it's going to initiate everything by taking advantage of the class name it has on it. Once I have that reference that I'm calling here food button, I'm going to add an event listener to it. The type of event listener here is going to be click. So whenever the button is clicked, we're going to call a method here, request foods. If we look into our request foods method, here is where we make our XHR call. The very first thing we do is create an instance of an XML HTTP request, and then we go on to configure it. Using the open method here, I'm able to set the type of HTTP request as well as the endpoint I'm calling to. Next, I'm able to set the object's onReady state change property to a function here that, as you can guess, is going to be called anytime there's a state change. In our case here, within this function, we're going to check the ready state, and if it's set to the enumerated type XML HTTP request done, as in this request is over, we should have a response now. We're just going to log that response out to the console. Request created and configured, the last thing to do is to actually send it, and you can see us doing that on line 19. Making sure all of this is saved now, if we go over to the browser and refresh our page, once the application loads up, there's our get foods button, and if I go ahead and press it, after some time you can see our food object coming back from the server containing a few fruits. Doing things this way asynchronously means that while waiting for the response to come back, if our web page had anything else to do, it could do so freely. Things like updating the user interface can remain unaffected, unlike if this call was a synchronous network call, in which case as soon as we made that call, the entire application would have to pause until a response came back, leaving us at the mercy of an unpredictable network.